You have a multi-trillion-dollar business in terms of mediating financial transactions. And so all of the intermediaries today, the third parties, the middlemen, have to figure out how to participate within this paradigm shift, or just to simply participate in the paradigm shift to survive, because it is going to be very disruptive.
Hey, welcome back to the latest in this series called Decoding Crypto with Ryan Grace, all the way from Chicago. Ryan is, of course, the head of Tasty Crypto over there. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thank you. It's nice to see you, Angeline. How are you doing?
Good, really good. Earlier we talked about, all things risk associated with crypto, but I want to kind of focus on where we're heading with this and the future of crypto and why it matters perhaps more now than ever, right? So we have some people sat on the fence where, they say crypto is still the unknown. And then there is the other side of the fence, saying that it's now deeply embedded in global finance, that with blockchain tech being adopted by banks and institutions, that this will only improve transaction speed, transparency, and adoption.
Yeah, I don't know if we're totally there yet, where it's deeply embedded in the broader global financial system, but we're clearly on a path where the existing system and some of the efficiencies that are gained by blockchain technology are starting to converge. You still need regulations that many of these financial institutions can adhere to. They're on their way. Mm-hmm. But in terms of adoption, you're absolutely seeing positive growth rates there, right? We're at 500 million people, roughly, give or take, in terms of crypto users globally. By the end of this decade, it's estimated that we'll be closer to 1 billion, if not prior to that. So we're on the path. We're seeing positive developments here in the US and elsewhere on the regulatory front. And you're seeing a lot of large institutions, whether those are financial services companies, they're banks, they're payments companies, they're all starting to look at this a lot more closely than they have in the past.
What kind of growth are we talking about here? I mean, speaking about the US, I saw a figure from security.org saying that in 2025 so far, some 28% of American adults roughly own cryptocurrencies. Do you expect this figure to grow? And if so, by how much? Or do you expect it to kind of be plateauing at this level for now? What is the trajectory?
Yeah, at this point, I would expect it to grow, right? When you look at penetration rates around the world, at least in developed nations, you're right there, 20 to 30%. And that's grown substantially, where just years prior, it was 10, 15%. So I would expect that to continue to grow. I don't think that every single person or every adult, let's say in the US or in the UK or the EU, is going to necessarily be a crypto investor, but I do think that they will use this technology, and over time, whether they know it or not, I think a lot of the technical complexity will be abstracted away. But this technology will underpin a lot of financial services, making it more efficient, in some cases removing intermediaries. And so they'll, in a sense, become crypto users, whether they're crypto investors or not. So again, I do think that we're still in the early stages of adoption. And if you look at growth rates of crypto adoption compared to growth rates of the internet, and mind you, not everybody on the planet has access to the internet, but there are about 4.5 billion people that do. So with roughly 500 million crypto users here today, 4.5 or so, maybe 5 million internet users, 5 billion, excuse me, then you're likely to see more global crypto adoption over time.
At the same time, we are seeing this rise in adoption, but we're also seeing, some security factors that have led to hacks or loss of coins. I'm just giving you a few names, Bybit, DMM, Japan. Are we going to see this sort of continue, or are we going to see more hygiene, more security, more regulation, and therefore this will start, the incidences of like these will start to subside?
I think it starts to subside, right? We're never going to remove the cybersecurity threat in the same way that that's only growing here when we look at broader online businesses, e-commerce, fraud associated with some of this activity, right? That exists, it's persistent, And it's become a very large industry in terms of protecting against that, right? When we look at cybersecurity threats and fraud and the losses as a result of that for Fortune 500 companies, it's still an astronomical value, much more than what we've seen in terms of cryptocurrency exchange hacks. So cryptocurrency exchanges, service providers, participants in the industry are going to continue to face threats in the same way that the financial system does, and many others as well. But I think over time, it becomes more robust, it becomes more durable. You learn from mistakes. I think we see less of it. I think, again, you're going to have persistent cybersecurity threats, but within a more regulated environment that looks less like the Wild West that we have been accustomed to in the crypto space, I don't think that you're going to see the FTX style kind of fraud and some of the issues that have plagued the industry. There will still be those threats to the industry, but I don't think it'll be by players that are within the industry.
This also coming in a time when we have a huge institutional adoption and interest in adoption. So we've heard from the BlackRocks, the JPMorgans. We're seeing major financial players like the big banks, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, and governments increasingly give off good, positive mood music surrounding crypto. We now finally we talk about a shift, but it's actually that paradigm shift that everyone's looking for, right? With enough momentum, is it now that we are finally able to say that crypto has shifted towards mainstream acceptance and integration?
Yeah, I think so. I think absolutely mainstream acceptance and integration. I mean, I think you're still going to have skeptics, and maybe rightly so, depending on what area of crypto that we're talking about. But when you think about Bitcoin, certainly has reached mainstream adoption. We are starting to see the growth of stablecoins. I think that only continues. The stablecoin market cap right now is about 250 billion in total across all chains. And I think that by the end of this decade, you likely get to a market cap of $1 trillion. You're going to see more and more companies that participate, maybe starting there. So certainly has reached, to some degree, mass adoption. I think there's two things at play here. One, when you look at countries, governments, sovereign wealth funds, large financial institutions, endowments, et cetera, that are starting to look at an investment in the space, that's in Bitcoin. And that's looking at, in some ways, diversifying away from dollar-based collateral very slowly over time within the financial system. And there's a variety of reasons for that, whether it's currency debasement or the weaponization of the dollar by the authorities here in the United States. Right or wrong, you have a bit of a fracture in the system, and you're starting to see a shift away from that. It's the one asset that has characteristics similar to gold. It's a hard asset in many ways, and it's untethered to the existing system. So you're seeing the adoption of that in a financial sense. But then from a technology perspective, the adoption of blockchain technology is ongoing. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is this is a technology that disrupts financial intermediation. You have a multi-trillion-dollar business in terms of mediating financial transactions. And so all of the intermediaries today, the third parties, the middlemen, have to figure out how to participate within this paradigm shift, or just to simply participate in the paradigm shift to survive, because it is going to be very disruptive. It's much more efficient. It's ultimately faster, cheaper for the end user, but it removes some of the big players that have very lucrative businesses that sit in between here. And so there will be a push and pull. And I think that's why in some cases you've seen, kind of a slow start to the evolving regulations on a global basis. But I do think it's inevitable. And so on one hand, you have all these companies that are going to adopt this technology. You'll see more users and more use cases as a result. But on the other hand, you already have today a lot of, very smart investors that are keen on Bitcoin.
And Ryan, let's end for these investors so that they can look ahead. What are the key events that they should be looking out for that will impact crypto? We've already seen the latest Bitcoin halving that was in 2024. We have also seen, Bitcoin ETFs launched as well. And you touched a bit on regulatory shifts too. What are the key events that you are looking out to in the coming year?
Yeah, within the next year, the events that are on my radar, as I'm U.S. centric and sit here in Chicago, are primarily focused on U.S. regulation. So legislation that passes here in the U.S., both related to stablecoin as well as the broader crypto market and an infrastructure bill there. Whether we get that in the next 3 months, 6 months, or a year, or we get it all, who knows? I'm hopeful, and we've heard a lot that's encouraging. I think that we would consider, it will be something that's done this year. So I'm hopeful that you get regulation. I think that then leads to a lot of participation by much bigger companies, financial services, institutions that have kind of sat on the sidelines here. And then the other thing that I would look at from a price perspective and maybe the participation side of things is twofold. One, more ETF approvals, so additional tokens. And I don't think that you need to see the ETFification of every crypto asset. But when you have some of these larger market cap tokens like Solana, for example, that there's not a lot of participation in from the institutional side, an ETF wrapper makes it a lot easier for some of these institutions to participate and brings new money flow into the space. And so I would look for more on the ETF front. I would look for the Ethereum ETFs in the US, at least, to be able to pass on staking rewards in the form of a dividend that further incentivizes participation in those. And I think the other thing that you have to have on your radar here is what happens from a monetary policy perspective. So interest rates globally are still relatively elevated from some of the lower levels that we've seen historically. I think the path forward is lower rates that should be conducive to liquidity in the system, and typically has supported these crypto asset prices. Whether you see anything beyond that is probably dependent on if there's a little bit of a slowdown that you have to go through first, and then you get debt monetization, you get open market purchases from the Fed and others. You could go through a bit of a volatile period prior to that, but ultimately on the other side of that, on the margin, that liquidity in the system has really benefited prices. So that's what I would be on the lookout for.
Amazing stuff. Thank you very much, Ryan Grace, the head of Tasty Crypto, joining us all the way from Chicago, talking about does crypto now matter more than ever. For more on the series, do check out our site where we're collating all this in one happy place for you. Ryan, catch you next time. Thank you very much, Ryan, and have a great week.
Thank you. You too.